Welcome to Health Quest. My name is Dr. Robert Stashko, and I have the privilege to have some guests here for today's show. And we're going to talk about a very important vitamin. Now, all vitamins are important, but vitamin D has gotten a lot of press news in the last couple of months, actually the last few years. And I want to try to clear up some misconceptions about vitamin D and mention some things that it's good for, and have the panel ask some questions as we go. First of all, vitamin D really isn't even a vitamin. Vitamin D is a hormone. And it's very important that we get the right form of vitamin D to supplement into our diet. Now, the best source of vitamin D is from sunlight. And depending on where you live, we can't always get the best sunlight all year round. As a matter of fact, if we're north of Atlanta, we really get less vitamin D absorption because of the decreased sunlight at the latitude that we live at. It's also known, again, besides being a hormone, it's also known as a sunshine vitamin. You might hear it be mentioned as a sunshine vitamin too. Now, the form that we must ingest is very important. It should be a vitamin D3. Why D3? Because vitamin D3 is the best bioavailable form of absorption of that particular vitamin. It's the same source as comes from the sun. So you'll see in the health food stores or in different pharmacies maybe vitamin D2, but you want the D3 form, which you can be assured you're get full absorption of that particular nutrient. The key thing with vitamin D is that there are so many health conditions that are benefiting from. The problem is the right international units. You know, for years it's been known as 400 to 800 IUs per day. It's now been found that's way too low. We'll get into if anybody has any questions about proper dosage as the show goes on. But vitamin D helps with all kind of bone conditions. It's been known for years to prevent rickets, but it's extremely important to be coupled with calcium, the proper form of calcium, not just any kind of calcium. There's all different calciums, and that's a whole other show. But it has to be coupled with calcium and vitamin D and phosphorus to have full absorption within the bone itself. It's also been shown to be tremendously beneficial for autoimmune conditions, colorectal cancer, prostate cancer, and breast cancer. As a matter of fact, some of the studies I've been reading, it's cancer across the board. So it's just something that the body really needs to fortify its immunity. What's interesting, though, and I found this really fascinating, is vitamin D produces a substance called AMP. AMP stands for antimicrobial peptides. What does that mean to you? It means natural antibiotics. So when you ingest vitamin D or get vitamin D from sunlight, you are actually helping produce your own natural antibiotics in your system, which, by the way, are not going to destroy the normal flora in your intestinal tract. Very important. So again, the body is so wonderfully put together, we just have to give it the right things and let it do its job, which is the key. A few more things I want to mention with sunscreens. Again, everybody's concerned, and rightfully so, with the ultraviolet rays, but the UVB ultraviolet ray is what we really need to absorb to allow the vitamin D to actually work within our system. UVB is the form that we need to be exposed to. What I was reading recently is that most sunscreens block UVB, but let in UVA, which is the bad ultraviolet. And an interesting study has shown that since the advent of more and more sunscreens being mentioned for people, the increase of melanomas have gone up tremendously. And some of the ties are showing it's not so much the exposure to the sun, but it's exposure to this UVA because the sunscreens are allowing this to come in. So there might be a correlation between the increase in melanomas and the UVA light that's being left through. So be very careful. And if you're going to get sun a certain time of the day between like 11 and 1, 15 to 20 minutes, you get about 10,000 IUs of vitamin D just by exposing the body, and not just the hands, but a bathing suit or so, face and arms and such. So that's your best source of vitamin D when you are in areas where the sun is brighter all year round, or summertime here in the northeast. There's a blood test called the 25-hydroxy vitamin D, which can be run by your physician, which will show you the levels of where you are with vitamin D. I feel everyone should have that run and get a baseline. Best time to run it is January, February, and March, once a year, especially where we live, because then we can see basically what our levels are. So any further ado, anybody have any questions about that's a little basic synopsis of vitamin D, and we can go from there. Ace?
Vitamin D, does that help nerve damage?
Not so much, no, it's mainly for bone, but because it's so across the board for entire health of the system, there is some effects on the nervous system with that too, but it's mainly immunity, cardiovascular, heart disease. Oh, one thing else I wanted to mention, again, getting back to the idea of, we talked about cholesterol on one show. If your cholesterol is too low, again, you basically will not absorb vitamin D because you need cholesterol to allow the biochemical exchange to occur. So if your cholesterol is way too low, the vitamin D you're taking is not going to be absorbed as well. And also, if you're overweight, the fat tissue will absorb more vitamin D, and therefore it will not get into the bloodstream. So people who are a little overweight should take more international units. And we can talk about dosage too. Go from there. That's a good question.
Dr. Stashko,
Terry?
I'm over 50. I can't drink whole milk anymore because it makes my stomach upset. So I switched to Super Skim. Am I still getting the vitamin D?
The fortified D that's found in milk, again, is a small amount. It's kind of like we talked about, the international units were way too low at one time, between 400 and 800 IUs. You're getting some in there, but you really need to get a blood test done and measure your levels. See where you actually are with your vitamin D content in the body. And then I recommend people during the winter months 5,000 to 10,000 IUs per day. Now that might sound like a lot, but believe me, the research is showing the RDA, which we talked about a little bit being so low, is just not going to cut it. And getting a fortified D like that, it's good, but it's not adequate. Not adequate. Okay?
Tell us how it came to be that we decided suddenly it's vitamin D3. For years, all we heard was we needed to supplement our vitamin D. We didn't hear anything about D2 or D3. Can you explain a little bit about that?
Because in the natural healthcare fields, we've known for years that the bioavailability of D3 is exactly the same as sunlight. And the D2 portion is more of a synthetic form. The body can still absorb it, but if you're taking, let's say, 5,000 IUs, maybe you're absorbing 1,000. So it's kind of like a synthetic vitamin versus a food source vitamin. You know, it has to be in the bioavailability, the most absorbable form for the body to actually utilize it. So the D2 just wasn't strong enough. You know, it's a good question, though. Good question. Karen?
Do you recommend when you take these, do you take them when you eat or on an empty stomach? How is
That
it
is
best
an
absorbed?
excellent question, because vitamin D is a fat-soluble vitamin, and any of the fat solubles, A, D, E, and K, should be taken with the meal or after the meal. If you take it before you eat, there's a risk of having some indigestion from that
So
too.
you take it when you're eating then?
Right, and so many people today have hydrochloric acid problems, you know.
Oh,
so
okay.
so with food.
That
Yeah.
explains a lot.
That explains why. Okay.
Yeah.
And that's another thing, you know, we get concerned about vitamin D being a fat-soluble vitamin, that we're going to become toxic on it.
So then you're not going to.
Well, again,
It's not like you can't overdose.
you can't overdose, and even if you're doing, you know, in the winter months like 10,000 IUs per day, most people, when they have a 25 hydroxy vitamin D done, you know, the range is between 50 and 80. Most people are in the 20s. So you're so deficient in it that, you know, again, it would take so many international units per day, like maybe 2-3 bottles of 1,000 international units, for that to even happen.
So then you would just pass through your system anyway.
Well,
it wouldn't stay and hang out.
some of it would, because it's fat soluble, it would be stored in the liver. So again, but never worry about the toxic.
Right.
It's so rare that would ever happen. But that's why the blood test came along, to at least measure the levels that people are at, which is important.
Because would that be good for, you're saying that's good for your skin, because I'm not allowed to be in the sun at all.
Right.
For that, any kind of light. So I should be kicking up my vitamin D then.
That's correct, because again, the best source of it is sunlight, if a person can tolerate it. But you know, some people can't because of the skin tones and those type things. But this kind of vitamin is so important, because even bone health, and there's so much osteoporosis and osteoarthritis going on today. And when people take, for instance, a calcium supplement, if it doesn't have vitamin D in it, you're not going to get that calcium absorbed into the bone. And the calcium has to be a proper form too, which is a whole other discussion that we get into. Matter of fact, I was watching, there was an article recently on the internet talking about that all this stuff really showing no scientific evidence anymore, and things are, the amounts they thought was right is wrong. I don't know. They didn't mention what form of vitamin D, like D3, that we should be taking. They didn't mention the calcium supplement, what kind of calcium it was. And again, this is what these shows are all about, to get people educated, to know there's a science behind what we're doing. And a healthcare practitioner who knows nutrition, basically people need to seek out. Because, again, it's misinformation. And I think it does this injustice.
I have a question.
Yep.
I might be getting off the track, but you're saying vitamin D. What about Arginex? Is that in that category somewhere?
Which one?
Arginex?
Arginex basically is a food supplement that deals with, it's made by Standard Process, and it's used for different types of conditions, but it's not really a vitamin D. No, no, it works for the kidneys, and it's a great supplement for possibly some weakened immune responses, but it's definitely different than the D itself. D is just a specific vitamin that really, but I'll tell you, there are so many effects of vitamin D, and I think the studies are still coming out showing more and more. But think about it: colorectal cancer, breast cancer, prostate cancer. I mean, these are big. You know,
I hear about them every day.
yeah.
Every day I hear these.
And like when I mentioned about the antimicrobial peptides, think about a vitamin that is allowing your body to produce its own antibiotics.
So that's what it'll do then.
Oh, it's phenomenal what it does, you see. And that's why a lot of infections, when people are on vitamin D, adequate amounts, their immune system's doing much better. And if they get a virus or bacteria, they can fight it off more efficiently, you know, with something like that.
I got a bottle filled up right
Dr.
now.
Stashko, is
Yes.
it more important for women to watch their vitamin D levels than for men?
Across the board, everyone, Terry. Because again, with the women especially, yes, with the osteoarthritis, the osteoporosis, osteopenia, those type things. But even the little children years ago, before they realized how important vitamin D, you know, is, the rickets was a very common condition, you know, that the children got. And now with the vitamin D, again, springing off of that, again, because it's so important for the bones, it is a preventative for most arthritises long term, you know, as a supplement, which is the key thing. But don't be concerned about toxicity, really, you know, with something like that. Not even you, Ace. No, you're fine. You're in pretty good shape to begin with anyway. You do a good job.
I'm glad you think.
Yeah. Well, listen, it was another great show. I want to thank you all for being here again. And the beauty of these shows is to get information out to you, the public. And remember, you write your own prescription for your health. Thank you.